Now available in paperback and e-readers, Spellbound, A Darker Shade of Black. Get your copy today at your favorite online bookseller. I finally got a chance to take a look at the movie American Fiction on Amazon Prime. Now, I have been wanting to see American Fiction ever since it got released back in 2023. Unfortunately, the film had an extremely limited release, and I had to wait for the film to finally come to streaming. And as I was scrolling through the features on Amazon Prime as related to movies, I finally found American Fiction, and I got a chance to take a look at it this weekend. And this film, which was making a commentary on the racism that goes on in the publishing industry, was one I was looking forward to. Unfortunately, the film that I watched was deeply disappointing because writer and director Cord Jefferson just goes out and pulls a lot of punches as related to making a commentary on the racism that goes on in the publishing industry. Now, I know he was basically limited by the adaptation of the novel Erasure, written by Percival Everett, but this film just pulls a lot of punches as related to the racism in the publishing industry, but it does give you some insight onto why we have all this racism in the publishing industry, and part of it is because we have this buffer class of bourgeois black folks who basically are trying to write the stories of the black experience without trying to offend all the white people in society. That is the commentary that is tried to be made with American Fiction, and this film, I can see why it basically did not win the Academy Awards, because it just doesn't go far enough. No, it pulls too many punches, and the abrupt ending are the thing that make the film fall short of being great. Now, American Fiction is an okay film, but it's not on that high level that a lot of critics wanted to acclaim it to be. Now, American Fiction is about a frustrated black male author, Thelonious Monk Ellison, who comes from the black bourgeoisie, who was the firstborn son of a guy who was a doctor and his wife, and who now currently resides in Los Angeles. And he's a frustrated writer who writes these stories that present a balanced image of black people, as he believes, and he's frustrated because these books sell poorly, and publishers tell him that his latest manuscript isn't black enough, and this whole perception of black is one that's quite troubling because Thelonious Monk himself doesn't believe in race. And that's where this frustrated writer basically stopped relating to Thelonious Monk because Thelonious Ellison was not a regular black man. No, he's basically one of these bourgeois bootlicks, and this bourgeois bootlick basically wants to create black stories but doesn't want to acknowledge any of the issues that foundational black Americans deal with, and does not want to understand the struggles of being black because he's trying to run away from his own blackness as a man. And that basically is due to the dysfunctional home environment that Thelonious Ellison comes from. He wants to run away from his blackness because he comes from a middle-class, upper-class family, and this upper-class, middle-class family is filled with dysfunctional individuals. His father wound up committing suicide in their Boston Beach home, and the mother is just sitting there suppressing all of her feelings as she's dealing with Alzheimer's disease regarding it. And one of the sister is dealing with a divorce. His other brother is a member of the alphabet community who got caught by his wife in bed with another man. And all of this comes to a head as Thelonious Ellison is dealing with his frustrations at work passive-aggressively by going out here and presenting in one of his lessons the N-word in a lesson. And as he presents this, one of these green-haired white social justice types takes offense to this black professor using the N-word in a lecture. And as he checks her, she basically runs out of the classroom and goes to administration. And as she goes to administration, this leads to the administrators looking to put the black professor on a leave for looking to talk about race, which is ironic because this is a professor who says he doesn't believe in race. And as he's put on leave, this is where he has to go out here and deal with his dysfunctional family, the cause of many of his issues as related to race. And as he's there, he goes to attend a literary seminar and is part of a panel and is disappointed to find out that not many people are coming to see the seminar presenting intelligent black men and women having a discourse over literature. However, they're headed over to a seminar with author Sinatra Golden, played by Issa Rae, with a best-selling novel called We's Live in the Ghetto, a street-lit novel, and he's disappointed to find that this whole seminar is completely packed, and packed with people who want to see black people and a book pandering to black stereotypes. And that part of the movie I did relate to because I've experienced that myself when I went to the Harlem Book Fair in 2009 and 2010 and tried to present my work over at the Harlem Book Fair and basically was ghosted by most black people. Most black people didn't want anything to do with positive black fiction, presenting balanced, humanized images of black people. That's what I ran into myself, so I can tell you that part of the movie, that part was true, but all the street lit black people wanted to go out here and see, and this film doesn't really go hard enough to show you that the whole foundation of this is a twisted perception of self. No, it's a twisted perception of self that many in the black bourgeoisie and the black elite take advantage of because it allows them to be a buffer class and allows them to have a position of power that they can leverage as part of the elite that keep black people at the bottom of the world. That's one of the punches that is pulled in this film as we follow Thelonious to his home where he's living with his mother for a minute and finds out that she has Alzheimer's disease. And as she's got Alzheimer's disease, she's not able to take care of herself. And eventually his sister, who was taking care of most of her bills and managing her money, eventually has a heart attack. And then it's eventually on him to start taking those responsibilities. And he's in a place where he's possibly on the brink of possibly losing his job because these leave of absences are basically something that they're doing before they fire a black man. And that's what they don't tell you in the film because, again, this director, basically Cord Jefferson, pulls the punches as related to black men on the job, and we don't really get this talked about in depth. And as the story goes on, he contacts his ne'er-do-well brother, Cliff, who's a member of the alphabet community, who really has nothing but indifference and callousness towards the mother because they believe that he's basically the favorite son and believes that he's the favorite son who basically isn't taking his responsibility. So there's a lot of passive aggressiveness here. Now, as Thelonious is in Boston, he runs into Coraline, a lawyer who lives across the street from him, and as he's living across the street from them, he basically is trying to find a way to get his life in order and trying to figure out how he can go out here and stop being a quote-unquote black author, which is really ironic. He says that his books are in the black section of a bookstore. This is where he says he doesn't believe in race and doesn't understand that being in the black section of a bookstore isn't a bad thing. No, being in the black section of the bookstore means that people can recognize your books and quickly identify them. But this is one of those guys who believes in all of the integration ideas and wants to have his books integrated by alphabetical order where they will be completely forgotten. This is what I've seen as somebody who's gone to stores like Barnes & Noble. If you want to see an author get quickly lost because nobody on their lunch break has time to go out here and peruse shelves from A to Z, what will happen is you will wind up, again, wasting time. And again, he didn't understand that the segregation in the book section is done for the benefit of the black author so that the store can quickly find these books and basically sell these books. No, Thelonious is one of these guys who believes in being a part of the great American melting pot, but not understanding that in the melting pot, this whole melting pot is not about looking to melt black people in. And that's the major flaw of this story, is that it never really talks in depth about white supremacy. I mean, I find it interesting we've got this story about this upper class black writer who doesn't understand about the concept of white supremacy. I mean, it just shows me how completely out of touch this dude is as related to a character. Again, you don't understand that the reason why your books are basically not getting over with black people is mainly because of the institution of white supremacy on the black mind. And that's the main reason why a lot of people go out here and buy street lit novels, is because they don't understand how white supremacy is influencing their mind, and how white supremacy has you seeing yourself in a ghetto instead of being a part of a larger world. That's the other ironic part about Thelonious Monk. He doesn't understand how the white supremacist basically has a major influence on the publishing industry. And as the story goes on, he's still not believing in race, as he says, but there's clearly racism being done to him by his academic institution as they look to fire him. Again, they put him on a leave for going out here and presenting the N-word because they were looking for an opportunity to get rid of him because they never wanted him there. But this bourgeoisie black man, again, is still caught up in ideals that he was taught possibly during the days of he was growing up by his parents, and his parents basically wanted to integrate, but they integrated not understanding about discrimination or the anti-black racism that goes on every day. And as he's frustrated by the cost of this woman Sinatra Golden's success and the care of his mother, because Sinatra Golden basically was out here. She had this best-selling book talking about We Lives in the Ghetto, which is just, again, a street-lit novel. This is where Monk decides to go out here and one-up her by writing the book My Pathology, which is supposed to be mocking literary stereotypes expected from black writers, such as melodramatic plots, deadbeat dads, gang violence, and drugs, and writes this book, My Pathology, and it's called Pathology. And after submitting it to his Hispanic agent out of contempt, they give him a $750,000 advance, and his agent tells him to do it under a pseudonym so that he wouldn't get his reputation ruined. And with his mother basically having episodes of dementia, he basically takes the deal, and he takes the deal as a guy talking about he's under the pseudonym Stagger Lee, and goes out under the pseudonym Stagger Lee as talking about this author is a guy who's on the run. And this guy, Stagger Lee, is supposed to be a criminal on the run, and he's supposed to be a guy, and when to Thelonious' surprise, again, he is sitting there shocked that these publishers basically are giving him all this money because this book is filled with stereotypes. But again, it just shows how his whole idea of race is being shattered in front of him, because what happened with Thelonious is he doesn't, again, understand that the publishing industry is an institution of white supremacy. And I talked about that in a previous video where a viewer requested about the author Harper Lee. And as an institution of white supremacy, this part of the media arm of white supremacy is all about promoting anti-black messages and promoting and supporting and rewarding anti-black messages in its literature. And that's one of the core reasons why his books weren't selling, because the media arm of white supremacy is not about elevating black people. Moreover, it is not about empowering black people, and that's why people want books like My Pathology. Now, if this guy was a so-called professor and actually studied the history of literature like I have done as related to studying the publishing industry, or had gone out here and read sites like the Jim Crow Museum, it would have given him a better understanding of why the kind of books that I produce don't sell, because those kind of books, again, present people with images that we have not been conditioned to be comfortable with, the idea of a balanced, humanized image of a black person, the idea of a black person being on the same level as a white person, the idea of a black person who has more than a view of the world outside of the one white supremacy wants us to have, because when it comes to white supremacy, the only black people they want to see are the ones that are in the ghetto, the ones that are on the streets, the ones who come from fatherless homes, the ones that are filled with a lot of ghetto melodrama. And again, this is what the white publishers want to see. And sadly, Thelonious, who doesn't believe in racism, can't see the racism going on around him, even though he's been allowed to become a part of a book committee that really doesn't really read the books, but just goes out here and they give him this as a diversity push. He can't see how he's being used as a token. Sadly, as he's out here making this book, My Pathology, and as he's going out here making this book, My Pathology, he's basically trying to take care of his mother, and again, makes a compromise with white supremacy, to basically be a part of white supremacy as he's getting this success. And that's where the facts of American fiction show us the racism that I have known that go on in the publishing industry, and know that the whole racism that goes on in the publishing industry, because when it comes to those who are part of the institution of white supremacy, they want to see stories that fit their narratives and ideas regarding black people, and not see an objective picture of us. And this is where American fiction really starts to fall apart, because it doesn't take that shot at the American publishing industry for its years of anti-black racism and its whole not unbalanced presentation of black people in books ever since it started. I mean, when I look at a lot of the black literature that has gone on, again, the only books that seem to get published and popular are ones that fit white supremacy's anti-black narratives, but we don't really get to see authors like myself who present that balanced story presented in the publishing industry. And again, American fiction pulls punches by showing how this guy basically is a bootlick who doesn't really care about black people or the black image. He just wants to, again, he's upset because they think his scripts aren't black enough, because he's not their idea of black, not understanding the whole concept of being spellbound, which I talk about in my novel Spellbound, about trying to fit yourself in the black box that's acceptable to white people. And basically, this spellbound black professor wants to fit himself to get success into the black box that's acceptable to white people. And this bootlick, basically what he wants to do is make that compromise, and wants to use his mother as an excuse to make that compromise to be a part of the literary world. And to do that, he goes from making My Pathology to calling the book the F word. And after giving the title of the F word, he then goes out here and basically shows how he's just going to continue try to continue fitting into an antisocial world. Again, looking to go out here and fit into that world. Again, the whole thing is that everything falls apart for him as related to his relationship with Coraline after she said she enjoyed reading the F book that he made, the Street Lit book. And this is where the story comes to a head, where she finds out about the book and breaks up with him over the book. And also, the irony is that the white critics rave over this book, and she calls it pandering, which it really was pandering. And the whole thing is that the book was trauma porn, and again, it was just garbage all around. But the whole thing is that these books, basically, again, they're made for white people. And this was something that I heard a long time ago from another YouTuber who said this about these slave movies. This is a white guy. He said these slave movies and stuff are made for white people. And that's what this F book basically was. It was a white person's view of black people. And to Thelonious's chagrin, this book is nominated for a book award, and it's the same book award committee he's a part of, the same book award committee that basically says that they don't read any of the books all the way through. They read about 100 pages of the book, and again, are basically giving this book an award for the same reason I believe that books like Alice Walker's The Color Purple and Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun were given awards. They were given awards because they were the same type of trauma porn that racists and white supremacists like to see, as related to black people being downtrodden and miserable, and fitting narratives that make the white supremacists feel comfortable about the image of black people. And Monk basically is on this panel of this awards situation, and the white people who are on the panel give his F book and the award. And as they give them the award, we get this whole situation that comes to the climax after the wedding of his mother's maid, and that leads to him having to deal with the impact of the father's suicide and the whole situation as related to their dysfunctional family. Now, this F book at the awards ceremony is given an award, and Monk goes on stage to make the confession, but the film cuts to black before we can hear it, and that's where the film American Fiction shows us the facts regarding white people's view of black people, because as Thelonious goes out here and gets this film turned into a movie by a Quentin Tarantino type guy, what they do is tell him that the F-word film adaptation needs a different kind of ending, and that's where the film basically shows us the racism of Hollywood and the publishing industry and the media arm of white supremacy, in showing us that the character in the F-word film, they show that the Thelonious character in the F-word film at the award show, the FBI swarm in on him and look to murder the character, which is par for the course for most American fiction featuring black characters, and takes this book right into the same whole pathology of many other books that were produced ever since the days of Jim Crow, whether it be the race novels like How Sleeps the Beast, which features a brutish type character who basically is put on the cover lusting after a white woman, and his end is death, or a book like Richard Wright's critically acclaimed book with Bigger Thomas, Native Son, which features, again, another brutish black character who basically, after murdering a white woman and putting her body in an oven, eventually meets his end through electrocution, or many of Richard Wright's other stories, or other books that, like Alice Walker's The Color Purple, a misandristic anti-black narrative. Again, these books basically all fit a narrative, and Monk's book basically fits that same narrative, and he's willing to go along because this bourgeoisie black bootlick basically wants white acceptance more than going out here and telling the truth about black people. And that's where I got a bone to pick with American Fiction. Here was an opportunity to talk about the actual racism that goes on in the publishing industry, and how many talented black authors like myself are denied an opportunity to go out here and tell a balanced story from a black man's perspective. But Hollywood didn't want to go out here and make that type of impact in saying about how black men's voices were silenced all throughout major publishing periods, from the 1950s when we had To Kill a Mockingbird come out, and the 1940s with Native Son, or the 1980s when Alice Walker was allowed to go out here and demonize black men, or the 1990s when Terry McMillan came out with Waiting to Exhale. That's where I got a bone to pick with American Fiction. I thought this film was going to go out and tell the story of an actual black author who cared about black people and was aware of himself, but this film has no black awareness, and sadly, it's because that's the main reason why they made this film, because this film wasn't about a self-aware black person who's going to talk about in depth about how the white supremacy impacts the perception of black people in the publishing industry. That's where I got a bone to pick with this film, because it pulls its punches, doesn't have that impact. And again, this is by design, ironically, because when in the system of white supremacy, you're never going to have anybody call out the system of white supremacy in the publishing industry and talk about the actual racism that goes on, the actual racism that I went and experienced starting in the 1990s, when I went out here to look to submit books like the first John Haynes, The Changing Soul. I could not get that book to even be read. And the first, Isis, basically ignored because it presented a fantasy image of black women, of being on the level of a goddess, because white women don't want to see a black woman as beautiful on that level. And when I did get one book to get people to look at, the Cassandra Cookbook, a lot of them had an issue with that book because of my depictions of down low men. They didn't like the idea of the down low man as the bad guy. And when I came out with one of my most critically acclaimed novels, The Temptation of John Haynes, they didn't even want to look at that book at all. In fact, I got all sorts of nasty stick comments from many literary agents, and again, pulls the punches in American fiction because they don't want to talk about the racism that goes on and white supremacy's using an agenda to push anti-black narratives in their literature. They don't want to talk about this, and they basically, again, skim things. Now, they'll talk about this author, Sinatra, who makes the street lit novel coming from a middle-class background, talking about the hood, and she says she's giving a voice to voiceless people, but what they don't want to talk about is how they silence the voices of people who, like myself, who come from the South Bronx, how many publishers don't want to talk to black authors like myself who come from the South Bronx, who grew up in poverty, and don't want to talk to us about our experiences, and don't want to talk to us about what really happened in the ghetto. They don't want to talk to guys like me because it doesn't fit their narrative, and they can't make it fit their anti-black agenda, because the pictures I present of black people show you a balanced picture of black people and a balanced picture of black life, and that doesn't really fit the fantasies they have created as related to black people. No, these folks basically in the publishing industry, they basically want to make books that fit white supremacy's ideas and want to brainwash or spellbind you, as I talk about in my novel, Spellbound. In my novel, Spellbound, I talk about how black folks became spellbound, like Thelonious, in wanting to fit themselves into black boxes to acceptable to white people, and they walk away from what their parents gave them, similar to what Thelonious has done, walk away from what their parents have given them to fit into a larger white world, and as they look to fit themselves into the black boxes that make them acceptable to white people, what they want to do is go out here and compromise with white supremacy and gain white acceptance from white people. And again, this has more value to them than diamonds, rubies, gold, or even money, because that's what really makes Monk a messed up character, Thelonious a messed up character, is that he values white acceptance more than black pride. And that's what makes American Fiction a very disappointing movie for me, because the Thelonious character basically is only looking for white acceptance, and he's willing to walk away from academic white acceptance to get Hollywood's white acceptance. And that's where the film, again, is a disappointment for me, because it shows me that the only way to get success as related to so-called white social circles is to, again, seek white acceptance, and basically the only people they're going to allow to be in those circles are bootlicks and buffers, similar to what Professor Black Truth has been saying in many of his videos. And when I looked at this movie, it basically made me look at 20 years of my life that I spent writing positive black fiction and basically looking to try to present positive pictures of black people. And basically makes me realize that, sadly, with this system of white supremacy, it will be hard to convince many black people to see the truth about themselves, because we've got too many bootlicks out here looking to, again, make compromises with white supremacy, too many bootlicks looking to get white acceptance, and that's why we got all these ghetto images and street lit, again, mostly coming from suburban people, similar to the way we got with the gangster rappers. The gangster rappers themselves, again, made a lot of compromises with white supremacy, and again, really troubles me, because when I look at Generation X, and this is a Gen X movie, these characters are Gen X people, it really troubles me that many of these people they didn't take heed to the messages of guys like Bill Cosby or guys like Spike Lee or many of those individuals. No, when they, like the baby boomers, got their opportunity, they went out here and looked to make a compromise with white supremacy. And that's the whole thing that really troubles me, that we really don't want us to see human images of black people. That's the thing that troubles me about about thinking about the overall film American Fiction, because I think about, I started out in 1998 looking to go out here and submit these kind of books. Now I understand why those kind of books get rejected, why those books don't sell well, because sadly most of America has been spellbound by white supremacy, and because most of America is spellbound by white supremacy, what happens is that we don't really, many people are so busy looking for white acceptance that they don't want to see us being empowered, don't want to see images of ourselves that value ourselves. And again, sadly, a lot of black people, again, they watch they imbibe this kind of media, not understanding the effects of this media. They imbibe this media, not understanding the effects on their minds. And American Fiction could have really made a thought-provoking movie, but made compromises in an effort to try to get white validation, and that's what makes this film fall short. It makes American Fiction as a movie fall short because it doesn't want to deal with the facts regarding white supremacy the way I did with my novel Spellbound and my first novel Isis in 2002. Now in 2002 I didn't know what white supremacy is, but I talked about the racism that Isis encountered as a goddess coming down to Earth and being a part of America. And again, as this goddess comes into America, she becomes indoctrinated into white supremacy, and it infects her mind to the point where she gets hatred in her heart, and she winds up killing Klansmen after they lynch her husband and murder her son. And that's not the kind of story I think the mainstream media would want to talk about white supremacy's effect on a god's mind to the point where they can make a person hate people. And that's what I put in the first Isis book. And I also tackled this in my novel Spellbound, where the biracial Matilda Crowley deals with the effects of white supremacy as related to the spellbound mindset, where black people basically want to seek white acceptance even though they have lived the American dream on Sugar Hill. Sugar Hill was a neighborhood built by foundational black American maids and Pullman porters and some of our top elite black people, but we didn't value that neighborhood. We valued white acceptance more than the community that we built. And that's what I was talking about in Spellbound and many of the Spinsterella books, how we don't value ourselves because we value white acceptance more than anything. And sadly, with American Fiction, they don't really go out here and hit that punch as hard. They don't really go out here and have that impact because, again, the whole story is basically bootlick based, and the bootlicks are looking to get awards, looking to get fame. And the irony of American Fiction is it presents the facts regarding black bootlicks, and the facts regarding black bootlicks is that they're not willing to tell the whole story. And that's the saddest part about Cord Jefferson's American Fiction, is that this fiction doesn't really go out here and hit as hard, telling the facts about the overall racism that goes on in the publishing industry. Now, if you want to check out my novel that really challenges the whole institution of racism and white supremacy, you can pick up those books such as 2002's Isis and Spellbound and Isis Dark Incubus, which deals with the effect of white supremacy on the black female mind as related to black love. You can find those books and many of my other books that could not get published by mainstream publishers, such as The Temptation of John Haynes and the Cassandra Cookbook, which was retitled A Recipe for Success. You can find all of those books in paperback and Kindle format on Amazon.com, and you can also find them at other online booksellers like Draft2Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you want to see me do more movie reviews, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, The Temptation of John Haynes. Give in to temptation and pick up this action-packed African-American paranormal romance. Get The Temptation of John Haynes in paperback and e-readers today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis Dark Incubus. The goddess next door gets enthralled in a romantic entanglement with an evil incubus in this all-new Isis series adventure. Get your copy of Isis Dark Incubus in paperback and e-readers today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.